So, what have we looked at so far? Well, not very much of this book. I tried to paint a picture of the general themes that you'd encounter in this work, the kind of philosophy that Plato is doing, the arguments that he's giving. We're going to be jumping ahead today. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to read the whole thing, although I would encourage that you do so, because there's a lot of cool stuff in here, a lot of things that I think would help anybody in their understanding of knowledge and virtue and live a good and flourishing life. In any case, we're jumping ahead basically to just after the middle of the book. To give you a brief summary of what we've done so far and what we're skipping through, as you saw in Book 1, the discussion began, and it's all about these different conceptions of justice. Cephalus's conception gets criticized. Socrates is like, that can't be right. Polemarchus's conception gets criticized. Thrasymachus gets beaten down. Of course, Plato is going to write the sophist as losing the debate, right? Because the philosopher knows what's actually going on. And by the beginning of Book 2, Socrates has succeeded in drawing in the young aristocratic wealthy men there into the conversation, Glaucon and Adiamentus. Because at the beginning of Book 2, they say, oh, look, Socrates, you haven't offered us actually a correct, full description of what justice is. This is something that you need to do. I mean, come on, man. And how does Socrates respond? Well, okay, but we're going to open up a big conversation here. Because to talk about justice is to invoke all of these other ideas about reality, about what's true, about what's good. And so books 2 through 10 is the entirety of that discussion. Going on different tangents, weaving in different ideas here, all to present Plato's conception of justice and what the ideal city might look like. More specifically, in Book 2, we receive the, you could call it a thought experiment of the Ring of Gyges. This was probably the inspiration for Tolkien's The One Ring in The Lord of the Rings. The Ring of Gyges is a ring, a magical artifact that if you put it on, you can become invisible. And Glaucon and Adiamentus bring this idea up because they say, well, look, Socrates, the way that you've been talking about justice so far is you say justice can get us all these good things down the line. First of all, we're not sure if we buy that. Second of all, we want to know why we should pursue justice in itself, why it's good in itself, not just to get these good things down the line. And so they talk through that thought experiment, and Socrates tries to put up a defense of justice, that it does provide goods down the line, it's instrumental, and it is intrinsically choice-worthy, it's intrinsically valuable. And so the conversation greatly expands because Socrates says, to try to figure out what justice is, this is a really hard thing to do. So here's what we're going to do, guys. We're going to look at justice in the city. Because the city is larger, we'll be able to spot it more easily if we enlarge our picture here. So he sets up a comparison between justice in the individual soul and justice in society. And throughout these books, the argument is these are analogous in some way, and they influence each other. Justice in individual souls influences the justness in society and whether there's justice at all. Likewise, if the city is just or unjust, that is going to influence whether individuals are just or unjust. This opens up a larger conversation about education. One of the main arguments that we see in the Republic is Socrates saying, like, look, if you want to construct the ideal city, you want people to be good and happy and just, you need to have a certain educational scheme, okay? A certain educational program. And so they begin talking about that. What kind of education would this be like? How would our ideal people in the ideal city be educated? And Socrates lays out a program, what we would call literature. They receive a certain education in literature and music. They learn how to play instruments. They receive a certain education in poetry, how to write and analyze poetry. And, of course, they're going to be physically educated as well. Because if you're a society, if you're a city, you need some sort of force in order to mediate what goes on in the city, protect those, and lay down the law in the city, as well as defend against external attacks. So, the education of these guardians is what is taken up for a large portion of the book. As I emphasized the first class period we looked at this, Plato is working up to this idea of a three-tiered class society, right? Where philosopher kings are the rulers at the top, and then we have our auxiliaries. These are the police, soldiers who lay down the law and defend the city. And then we have basically our producers on the bottom. Glaucon and Adiamentus ask, well, how are we going to get people to sign on to this? Why should people want to live in a society in which, there are classes, in which if you're not in one of these two classes, right, you don't have really much power or say on what the laws and policies are? Well, to this, Socrates responds, we're going to tell the people a myth. Sometimes it is okay for the rulers to lie to those in the city to keep things in order. And he presents the myth of metals. And the myth of metals is like this. This is what we're going to tell the people to get them to sign on to this. When God was forming us, He created our souls in a particular way, with a particular nature, with particular talents and dispositions. So the philosopher kings, they were given gold souls. Auxiliaries were given silver. And I believe we have bronze. But the reason why you people should sign on to this is because God made you this way. He made you to participate in a certain class. And that's where you belong. And that's where you're going to be good at. Okay? This is a lie, okay? This is a noble lie to try to get people to sign on to this. In Book 4, what do we have? Well, we have this idea that, look, if we're trying to understand justice and construct an ideal city, an ideal people who are virtuous and knowledgeable and are doing what they're doing, we need to keep in mind that the way things are going to be structured, it all revolves around mutual flourishing. Because you might ask, does the philosopher want to rule? Do they want to be dealing with little political issues every day? No, what would the philosopher want to do? What do you think?
Seek their own truths or find their own knowledge that they're interested in, not just do politics.
Yeah, they just want to do philosophy shit. Okay? So we're going to have to convince the philosopher kings, or those worthy of being them, that, look, you need to rule because if you don't rule, things are going to be sucky. This is something that you should do. You should sacrifice kind of what you want to do a little bit for the mutual flourishing of the community. We also get in Book 4 Socrates' division of the soul, or what we might call the division of the mind. He basically thinks there are kind of three parts to the mind or soul. You have the rational part, you have the spirited part, that has to do with emotions, and then you have the appetitive part, which has to do with desire. Being a just person, acting justly, involves ordering these in a particular way. So justice will come about if people's minds, if people's characters are guided and ruled by reason as opposed to emotion or desire. Book 5 goes on to describe the ideal city a little bit more. Socrates says, well, look, these auxiliaries from which we're going to pull the philosopher king class eventually, they're going to be educated in a certain way such that they share everything. They're going to live in this kind of communistic way in which they share everything, because that kind of way is going to incentivize them to care for others in the city, care about everyone, protect everyone, so on and so forth. We also get the claim that the rulers of this ideal city need to be the philosophers. Why? Well, because philosophers know what's good, they know what's moral, they know what's true, they know what's healthy. So they're the only ones fit to rule and govern. What we're going to be looking at today is this idea right here. If philosophers are going to be rulers, well, what are they like? What kind of characters do they have? What do they do? How do they think? Socrates provides a sketch of this. And he considers a little bit earlier, too, how people view philosophers. And unsurprisingly, he says, people don't really understand what philosophers are about. They've been fed this false picture. So maybe in this book, this is Plato's attempt to kind of fix that picture that other people in Athens have of philosophers, right? Because a lot of them think they're troublemakers, people, that just corrupt others. I mean, that's what his mentor was accused of. Finally, we also get an explanation for why the philosophers should rule. And it is this point, where Book 6 begins. Any questions so far? Yes, no, maybe so. Okay. I won't erase this. I'll let y'all copy it down or take a picture later. Come on. Okay. Well, let's go ahead. Let's get started here. We're starting at the beginning of Book 6. We're also going to I'm going to introduce to you a famous image that Plato uses at the end of Book 6. And this will be a great lead into our last class period in which we talk about the allegory of the cave. So, could I get someone to be Glaucon? Perfect. Okay. Socrates' narration continues. Who the philosophers are then, Glaucon, who they aren't, and who they aren't has, through a somewhat lengthy argument and with much effort, somehow been made clear.
That's probably because it could not easily have been done very short.
I suppose not. Yet I, at least, think that the matter would have been made even clearer if we had had only that topic to discuss, and not the many others that remain for us to explore, if we are to discover the difference between the just life and the unjust one.
What comes after this one, then?
What else but the one that comes next? Is this a joke? Since the philosophers are the ones who are able to grasp what is always the same in all respects, while those who cannot, those who wander among the many things that vary in every sort of way, are not philosophers, which of the two should be leaders of a city?
What would be a reasonable answer for us to give?
Whichever of them seems capable of guarding a city's laws and practices should be established as guardians.
That's right.
So, is the answer to the following question clear? Should a guardian who is going to keep watch over something be blind or be keen-sighted?
Of course it is.
Well, do you think there is any difference then between the blind and those who are really deprived of the knowledge of each thing that is and have no clear model of it in their souls? Those who cannot look away, like painters, to what is most true, and cannot, by making constant reference to it and by studying it exactly as possible, establish where on earth conventional views about the beautiful, just, or good things, when they need to be established, or guard and preserve those that have been established?
No, by Zeus, there is not much difference between them.
Shall we appoint these blind people as our guardians then? Or those who know what each thing is, have no less experience than the others, and are not inferior to them in any other part of virtue?
It would be absurd to choose anyone but philosophers, if indeed they are not inferior in human things. The very area in which they are superior is just about the most important one.
Okay, so why should philosophers be the rulers? Yeah, how are they superior? Knowledge. They apparently have knowledge, Socrates says. And knowledge of what?
Like truly is and isn't changing.
Right. Knowledge of what truly is. What Plato has in mind here is something like this. There was a view that was popular before Plato's time and was even popular during his time, that everything in reality is just in flux and it's changing. Things are constantly changing. Nothing is staying the same. Nothing is stable. All things just morph and change. Okay? Plato's going to disagree with this picture. Why? Well, here's one reason. Take a look at this chair. Is it the same chair? Do you think there is something that makes a chair what it is? Presumably, you believe that there are different things in the world, right? Like this isn't the same as this marker, right? There are differences between them. Things seem to have different properties, identities. And as we saw in Descartes, you might think, well, look, we can track the identity of things through time. And perhaps through reason, we can figure out what makes a thing the thing that it is, and what the good is, and what justice is, and what a moral life looks like. The philosophers apparently have knowledge of that. They can tell you what makes a thing the thing that it is, why this is a chair and not a water bottle. And apparently, because they have this kind of knowledge, they can tell you what a good life is, what a just life is, how you should behave, what the city should look like, etc. So philosophers have knowledge of what truly is, but knowledge isn't the only thing that's important. If somebody is going to rule, what else do they have to be? Or what thing do they have to know? What has this whole book been about? Justice. Justice, Plato thinks, is connected to morality. What's good? How we should behave. Now, if a philosopher has knowledge, do you think they're going to be a good person or a bad person? Will they have a well-formed character, a properly ordered soul? Or no? Will they be vicious and disordered?
Well-ordered.
Presumably. That's something that Socrates has in mind here. The philosophers should rule because they have both knowledge and virtue. Their character is ordered in the proper way. Yes?
I had a question about that, because at the end of book 1 he was talking about how injustice leads to disorder, and it's like an internal conflict of the soul, but wouldn't he be assuming that everyone has a moral compass, and that everyone has a conscience that follows it? So wouldn't that not really be valid in giving his own idea? Like, you can't assume anything.
Yeah, he's going to say that everybody has the capacity to know what's right and wrong. But what he has in mind is this kind of picture. Like, look, there's some objective standard of what makes an action good, healthy, moral, what makes an action just. And we're kind of all hanging out down here, okay? But if we use reason, we can figure out what that is. So, yes, people have differing views about what's right and wrong. Their conscience might tell them different things. But that doesn't tell us that it's all relative. What it tells us is that people are mistaken in what they think is true and good. Does that answer your question? Okay, so the philosophers should rule because apparently they'll have knowledge, and with that knowledge they'll be able to figure out, what the good life looks like, how to live it, and they'll put it into practice. They'll be properly ordered. They'll have self-control, right? The reason will be guiding what they do, not their appetites, not their emotions, so on and so forth. So we don't want blind people as our rulers. Socrates says, shouldn't we explain then how the same men can have both sets of qualities? Glaucon?
It'd be asserted. Sorry.
Then, as we were saying at the beginning of this discussion, it is first necessary to understand the nature of philosophers, if they're going to be our rulers. And I think that if we can agree sufficiently about that, we will also agree that the same people can have both qualities, and that they alone should be leaders in cities. Let's agree that philosophic natures always love the sort of learning that makes clear to them some feature of the being that always is, and does not wander around between coming to be and decaying.
Yes, let's.
And further, let's agree that they love all of it, and are not willing to give up any part, whether large or small, significant or insignificant. Just like the honor lovers and passionate men we described before.
That's right.
Consider next whether there is a further feature they must have in their nature if they are going to be the way we described.
What?
Truthfulness. That is to say, they must never willingly tolerate falsehood in any form. On the contrary, they must hate it and have a natural affection for the truth. So it's not just that they know knowledge, it's not just that they're virtuous, they have a certain disposition or attitude towards what's truthful, and a different attitude towards what's false. Affection for truth, hate for falsehood. But it is not only probable, my friend, it is entirely necessary for a passionate man to love everything akin to or related to the boys he loves.
That's right.
Well, could you find anything that is more intimately related to wisdom than truth?
Of course not.
Then is it possible for the same philosopher? Is it possible for the same nature to be a philosopher, that is a lover of wisdom, and a lover of falsehood?
Certainly not.
So, right from childhood, a genuine lover of learning must strive above all for truth of every kind.
Absolutely.
But in addition, when someone's appetites are strongly inclined in one direction, we surely know that they become more weakly inclined in the others, just like a stream that has been partly diverted into another channel.
Of course.
Then, when a person's desires flow toward learning and everything of that sort, they will be concerned, I imagine, with the pleasures that the soul experiences just by itself, and will be indifferent to those that come through the body, if indeed the person is not a counterfeit, but rather a true philosopher.
That's entirely enough.
So, what else will philosophers be like? What do you think Plato has in mind here? Yes?
You shouldn't describe a true philosopher as someone who's like more concerned with like knowledge than over everything. And
Mhm.
he says that, and he will be indifferent to those that come through the body.
So he's more coming from like a mind perspective, not just talking about like the physical world.
Right. The philosopher is not going to be chasing after fuzzy pillows and great sex and Molly in the club. Okay? They're going to be pursuing truth. They will be concerned with the pleasures of learning and wisdom, not the pleasures of the body. Materiality. Focusing on that, Plato thinks, brings us down. It drags us down. Okay? So we might say, pursue pleasures of the mind. And what goes along with this is, again, they're not going to be living life just to make their body feel good. A person like this will be temperate then, and in no way a lover of money. After all, money and the big expenditures that go along with it are sought for the sake of things that other people may take seriously, but he does not.
That's right.
And of course, there is also this to consider when you are going to judge whether a nature is philosophic or not.
What?
You should not overlook its sharing in illiberality. For surely, petty-mindedness is altogether incompatible with that quality in a soul that is always reaching out to grasp all things as a whole, whether divine or human.
That's absolutely true.
So, not going to care about material possessions or money. I'm just going to sum that up as materiality. Not a lover of money, not trying to get rich, not trying to make it big in the city-state, become the next hip-hop poet in Athens, get status. No. Not going to care about, all these physical, material things that can bring us more pleasure. And do you imagine that a thinker who is high-minded enough to look at all time and all being will consider human life to be a very important thing?
He couldn't possibly.
Then he won't consider death to be a terrible thing either, will he?
Not in the least.
Then a cowardly and illiberal nature could not partake, apparently, in true philosophy.
Not in my opinion.
Okay, so what else is the philosopher like? Yes?
It doesn't like cowardly and illiberal natures, as it doesn't really help with like trying to find the truth. And it actually like prevents them from finding the truth.
Right. And the philosopher is not going to be afraid of death. Why? Well, because the philosopher is concerned with the things that ultimately matter. The truths of the cosmos. Understanding the nature of reality. Someone who is clinging to life, who is afraid of death and pain and suffering, and they'll do anything to avoid it. Plato is implying, look, these people aren't thinking and living the right way. They don't have the right priorities. The philosopher isn't going to prioritize material possessions or money or the body or try to do whatever they can to avoid death. We might say the philosopher prioritizes eternal things. Not the things of this world, but the things that are ultimately true and real, like knowledge, like justice. Not these particular material, physical things that are always changing, that come and go, that don't last, that don't really matter. Well then, is there any way that an orderly person who is not money-loving, illiberal, a lying impostor, or a coward could come to drive a hard bargain or be unjust?
There is not.
Moreover, when you are considering whether someone has a philosophic soul or not, you will consider whether he is just and gentle, right from the time he is young, or unsociable and savage.
Of course.
And you won't ignore this either, I imagine.
What?
Whether he is a slow learner or a fast one. Or do you expect someone to love something sufficiently well when it pains him to do it, and a lot of effort only brings a small return?
No, it could not happen.
What if he could retain nothing of what he learned because he was completely forgetful? Could he fail to be empty of knowledge?
Of course not.
Then, if he is laboring in vain, don't you think that in the end he is bound to hate himself and what he is doing?
Of course.
So, let's never include a person with a forgetful soul among those who are sufficiently philosophical. The one we look for should be good at remembering.
Absolutely.
The people who are going to rule, we're going to look for quick learners with good memories. Why? Why quick learners with good memories? You can offer your own opinion too.
I mean, just like aside from the story, I mean, of course you want, I mean, those are very positive traits. And I mean, overall, out of all the positive traits, those are probably like two of the best. If you're able to adapt to almost everything and remember everything from previous experiences, of course you're going to be a naturally good leader. I mean, there's literally no other way you wouldn't be, right?
Sure.
I mean, they're specifically looking for traits that are like some people are like, oh, leaders are naturally born in. Socrates is like agreeing with this. That's why they're specifically picking people.
Right. I mean, is somebody going to be able to be a good leader if they can't remember the economic system that they have or the policies that they have? Will they be a good leader if they can't remember anybody's names? Will they be a good leader if it takes them an hour to learn addition as an adult? Yeah, probably not, right? You need to have certain traits and skills and capacities and memory. Why would memory be important to Plato? Think about the overarching themes of this work. Yeah?
Like if he believes in like sort of like Elenchus and like dialectical discussion is like the peak of learning, like he probably thinks it's important that throughout that process someone remembers how they got to the answer.
Yes, for sure. Anything else? You're absolutely right.
Bad memory, you can recall false things. You will always be truthful.
Yeah, I mean, faulty memory, right? You're going to come to have false beliefs, right? Anything else you can think of? Will the philosopher know about history, do you think? Or will they be completely oblivious to their history, to the history of their city-state? Why would knowing history and remembering history be important? So you don't what?
Repeat it.
So you don't repeat it, right? Yeah, I mean, again, one of the things Plato is doing here is he's trying to dethrone this Homeric tradition, right? But in order to know what not to do in the future, you need to remember what happened in the past. You need to know what happened in the past. Otherwise, you're going to repeat the mistakes of history, right? So perhaps that is also a reason why we'll want our leaders, our philosopher kings, to have good memories. Moreover, we would deny that an unmusical and graceless nature is drawn to anything besides what is disproportionate.
Of course.
And do you think that truth is akin to what is disproportionate or what is proportionate?
So what is proportional?
Then, in addition to those other things, let's look for a mind that has a natural sense of proportion and grace. One whose innate disposition makes it easy to lead to the form of each thing which is.
Indeed.
Okay, so this is also going to be an important one. What kind of people don't we want ruling over cities? Graceless people and unmusical people. Why? Any idea? Why should being musical and graceful be so important for a leader? Any ideas?
Because a lot of the people are going to look to like the leader as like a role model. So like if the leader is like showing like dignity and grace, like it's going to like trickle down in the society, and everyone's going to want to be like that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, people are going to look at the leaders as role models. What Plato has in mind here is a discussion, an idea that we had to skip over, unfortunately. The reason why the guardians are going to receive an education in poetry and instrumentation and music is because Socrates thinks our characters can be heavily influenced by the media we consume, the songs we hear, the poetry we read, the stories we read. And furthermore, he thinks that listening to this kind of stuff is going to either make our soul more ordered and healthy or less ordered. So if you're musical, okay, you're able to see the rhythms and patterns to life. And your soul will be properly ordered or in harmony. Ultimately, Plato thinks justice is something like this. Proper ordering of elements or parts. You are a just person if your parts, the parts of your soul, the parts of your body, the parts of your character, are all ordered in the proper way and in harmony, working together for a common end, a common goal. Injustice is the opposite of this. It is chaos, disorder, fragmentation. Okay? So we'll need our leaders, he says, to be musical. If they receive the proper musical education, they will have stellar characters, the proper dispositions, attitudes. Well then, do you think the properties we have gone through aren't interconnected, or that any of them is in any way unnecessary to a soul that is going to have a sufficiently complete grasp of what is?
No, they're all absolutely necessary.
Is there any criticism you can find then of a pursuit that a person cannot practice adequately unless he is naturally good at remembering, quick to learn, high-minded, graceful, and a friend and relative of truth, justice, courage, and temperance?
Not even moments to criticize
Well then, when people of this sort are in perfect condition because of their education and their stage of life, wouldn't you entrust the city to them alone? And this is where we're going to stop for right now. Break into your small groups. Everything that we just discussed here, the nature of the philosopher, what they're like, what they care about, their priorities, how they're oriented toward the world. Do you think this makes a good picture of a leader? Is this someone that you'd want leading you? Is Plato missing something? Has he got something wrong? Talk about this with the people around you. I'll give you a few minutes, okay? All right, go for it. What do you guys think about this picture? It seems okay? It seems good? Is there anything you would add? Like, what else would you want your leader to be like? He's got knowledge. He's got a good character. He's got a good picture, you think? All right, okay. All right, what do y'all think back here? Is this a good picture?
It's not like a bad story, like a bad film, but it definitely does like probably have some flaws. And like one of the things I thought of, like what if like some of the philosopher kings were like arguing with each other and couldn't come to like a consensus? Just like then would they have like the lower tiers then vote, or would that be like part of the situation then as well?
Yeah. I mean, what would happen in a situation like that? You might think unrealistically, Plato thinks, well, because they know the truth and they're wise, they wouldn't disagree on what the right thing to do is. But things are not that smooth in practice, right? Right. Plato would definitely say we are. Yeah. We are not properly ordered, you know, and many of us don't grasp the truth. So, but the ideal philosopher kings, they do. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, what do you all think? Has Plato given us a good picture of a leader? Has he given us a good argument that the true philosopher would have these characteristics?
I think he's given a good argument that he's created 3 classes and then said that the other 2 couldn't have them, and so the philosopher would have to have it. But he also attributes him all the virtues that would like let him by proxy add any one that he would need to be a leader. It's like, oh, if he's truthful and he knows justice, he would also be equitable. If someone said, oh, you left out equity, it's like, oh, if he's not, if he's truthful and justice and equitable, he must also be fair. And it's like,
right.
This kind of thing where he's given the philosopher all the traits he would need to like branch out into anything he might have missed, but made sure that the guardians and the appetitive ones wouldn't have those traits, and so like they would need to be the rulers.
Right. So you're saying he's covering his base as well. Yeah.
We also talked about like who gave him the authority to like just define what a philosopher is. Like he's not the first person to ever have a thought. So it's like, okay, you're saying that a philosopher is this, but like what if that's not the actual definition and you're just kind of picking out all your best traits to, like, I don't know, bring up philosophers as a whole when not all of them are like that.
Yeah, I mean, you might think, look, Plato, you're really painting philosophers in such a perfect light here. Like, most people aren't like this. Do you all know a lot of philosophers? Maybe you know one or two. I mean, I'm not perfect, okay? I don't even know if I have the truth. There are things I can work on and improve. But you know what Plato would say to that?
Not a true philosopher.
Not a true philosopher. Is that kind of dumb or silly?
I don't know. I just think it's funny.
It might be like a cop-out, right?
It's a thing they cover a lot in the book, like in first semichism argument, right? Like, well, if they fail even once to meet that definition, then they are not that thing. So, like, they're talking about like an absolute version that doesn't exist.
Right. This is another thing that we should keep in mind, right? Plato is painting an ideal picture, right? He's giving us a picture of the ideal city, the ideal rulers of the city who would be true philosophers. Like, look, and I think Plato recognizes this too. This isn't ever going to come about. The world is messy and complicated. People are not perfect. People have, they make mistakes. They have false views sometimes. Maybe most times, you want to say. How close we can get to this is a real question, right? Plato, I think, does recognize that, yeah, we're painting, an ideal kind of utopia here. It's not actually realizable. Although maybe you want to think he does have some hope. He does have some faith. Okay, in any case, we're going to skip past most of this dialogue. We're going to go to the end because there's one image that I want to give y'all, which will help you for your reading on Tuesday and help make Plato's views a lot clearer to you. Okay, this is going to be his image of the divided line. So, could I get someone else to be Glaucon? Perfect. Okay, thank you. At this point in the dialogue, Glaucon has pressed Socrates. What is the good? What is ultimate reality like? What is actually true? What makes a just life actually just? And Socrates says, well, I am certainly omitting a lot.
Well, don't. Not even the smallest detail.
I think I will have to omit a fair amount. All the same, as far as is now possible, I won't purposely omit anything.
Please don't.
Then, you should think, as we have said, that there are these two things, one sovereign of the intelligible kind in place, the other of the visible. I do not say of heaven, so as to not seem to you to be playing the sophist with the name. In any case, do you understand these two kinds, the visible and the intelligible?
I do.
Do you have any idea what he might mean here? Is the chair a visible thing? Is the marker a visible thing? Is the property of addition in mathematics a visible thing? Or an intelligible thing? How about justice? Is justice something you can grasp with your senses? Or is it something you grasp with your mind? Plato is setting up a dualism here. Okay? He's saying, look, you can separate reality into basically two parts, the visible and the intelligible. All of this relates to what we're going to call, what people call, Plato's theory of the forms. This is his metaphysical, epistemological picture of how reality works, what reality is like, and how we know it. So, in the universe, Plato thinks, there are physical, visible things in this world that we can see and sense with our eyes and ears and mind. We can taste and touch the visible things. And then there are intelligible things that we can't get at with our nose or our eyes or our ears, but with our mind, with our reason. This is the realm of the intelligible, like concepts, ideas. You can't see an idea, it's not visible, right? But you can grasp an idea. You can grasp a concept, right? Okay, represent these two different parts of reality, this distinction then, by a line divided into two unequal sections. Then divide each section, that of the visible kind and that of the intelligible, in the same proportion as the line. In terms now of relative clarity and opacity, you will have as one subsection the visible and images. By images, I mean first shadows, then reflections in body of water, and in all close-packed, smooth, and shiny materials and everything of that sort. Do you understand?
I do understand.
Then in the other subsection, put the visible. Put the originals of these images. That is, the animals around us, every plant, and the whole class of manufactured things.
I will.
Would you also be willing to say then that, as regards truth and untruth, the division is in this ratio? As to what is believed is to what is known, so the likeness is to the thing it is like? Next, consider how the section of the intelligible is to be divided. As follows. In one subsection, the soul, using as images the things that were imitated before, is forced to base its inquiry on hypotheses, proceeding not to a first principle, but to a conclusion. In the other subsection, by contrast, it makes its way to an unhypothetical first principle, proceeding from a hypothesis, but without the images used in the previous subsection, using forms themselves and making its investigation through them.
I do not fully understand what you are saying.
Do y'all agree? Let's try again. You see, you will understand it more easily after this explanation. I think you know that students of geometry, calculation, and the like hypothesize that there are odd and even numbers, that there are various figures, 3 kinds of angles, and other things akin to these in each of their investigations, regarding them as known. We know these things. These they treat as hypotheses, and do not think it necessary to give any argument for them, either to themselves or to others, as if they were evident to everyone. Like the properties of a triangle, right? We all agree on those. They're given, they're defined. We take them as true. And going from these first principles through the remaining steps, they arrive in full agreement at the point they set out to reach in their investigation.
I certainly know that.
Then, don't you also know that they use visible forms and make their arguments about them, although they are not thinking about them, but about those other things that they are like? If you want to prove something about a triangle, you'll probably draw a triangle on your paper, right? And you'll start making little notations, talking about the angles, right? You construct a thing to then prove some sort of theorem or law. That's what he's saying here. Okay? They make their arguments with a view to the square itself and the diagonal itself, not the diagonal they draw on the paper, and similarly with the others. The very things they make and draw, of which shadows and reflections in water are images, they now in turn use as images in seeking to see those other things themselves that one cannot see except by means of thought.
That's true.
This then is the kind of thing that I said was intelligible. the soul is forced to use hypotheses in the investigation of it, not traveling up to a first principle, since it cannot escape or get above its hypotheses, but using as images those very things of which images were made by the things below them, and which, by comparison to their images, were thought to be clear and to be honored as such.
I understand that you mean what is dealt with in geometry and related crafts.
Also understand, then, that by the other subsection of the intelligible, I mean what reason itself grasps by the power of dialectical discussion, treating its hypotheses not as first principles, but as genuine hypotheses, that is, stepping stones and links in a chain, in order to arrive at what is unhypothetical and the first principle of everything. Having grasped this principle, it reverses itself, and keeping hold of what follows from it, comes down to a conclusion, making no use of anything visible at all, but only of forms themselves, moving on through forms to forms and ending in forms. Plato here is describing how those who understand what reality is really like, true knowledge, how they do this, how they come to this kind of knowledge. They use their reason to grasp, to analyze, to think about concepts, okay, like pure concepts. And so, using this image, Plato has provided us with a metaphysical picture, a theory of metaphysics, and an epistemology. We have the intelligible realm, and we have the visible realm. Okay? On the bottom of, you might say, the bottom of reality, the things that are least true, least certain, least real, we have images. Shadows, reflections, the painting on the wall, images of things. Okay? These are the least real, least stable things in the world. Also in the visible realm, we have things, or what we might call sensible particulars, animals, plants, trees, markers, erasers, chairs, water bottles, flags, things in the world, objects. Things that you can sense with your five senses. Food, thermometer, projector. These things are more real than images. They have more reality than images. But they're not ultimately real. Because this physical reality that we live in is in flux. It is changing. And things degrade. In the intelligible realm, we have things like mathematical objects, numbers, like mathematical theorems in geometry, things like this. These are more real and more stable than physical things. But we don't use our senses to get at them like we do physical things and images. We use our mind. We use reason to grasp these things. Finally, what we have at the top, the things that are ultimately real, ultimately stable, eternal, are what he calls the forms. Okay? And the forms you might think of as abstract, unchanging, eternal concepts. Plato has this picture in mind. You can divide our universe into two realms. The intelligible realm that we can get at with our minds and reason, and the physical realm that includes material things and images of things. Okay? Reflections in water, physical objects, whatever. Plato believes that what ultimately makes a thing what it is the degree to which that thing participates in the form of that thing. In other words, what makes this a desk? This desk is a desk because it participates in the form of deskness, the concept, the objective, eternal concept of what makes a desk a desk. What makes this a marker? Well, this particular physical thing participates in some sense of this concept of markerness. These concepts that are abstract, universal, eternal, unchanging, they don't exist in our material reality. They exist in a different realm. But we gain access to that realm. We figure out what these forms are: deskness, justice, goodness, by using reason and dialectic. Through philosophy, we can get, in some sense, to the forms and just grasp them. We can understand what makes a desk, what makes a just action just, what makes a good action good, what makes, this table a table. These concepts are the forms. Okay? And we don't use our senses to figure out what makes a desk, or what makes a just action just, or what makes a human being a human being. We use reason. We use our minds. Okay? So what makes a thing is the degree to which they participate in the form or the concept of that thing. Deskness, tableness, humanness. This intelligible realm is stable, it's fixed, it's eternal, it's true. Unfortunately, we don't live in this realm. We live in the visible realm. And this physical, visible reality that we live in is flawed, it's imperfect, it's changing, it's in flux. And we'll say the intelligible realm, or intelligible reality, is perfect and unchanging. This is the picture that Plato has in mind. Okay? If you really want to know what justice is, if you want to know what a human being is, if you want to grasp the truth, you need to use philosophy to grasp the forms of these things. These concepts that ground what makes the thing the kind of thing it is. So you might say, everything has a form or an essence. what makes it what it is. And in our physical world, this is a desk to the degree that it matches this eternal form in this other world. Other realm, we should say. I mean, they're all in the universe in some sense, but... True knowledge, knowledge of ultimate reality, how things actually work. We get that through understanding. Noesis. We can have knowledge of things in the intelligible realm, okay? If it's knowledge of the forms, we've achieved like an incredible, perfect, awesome understanding of how reality ultimately works. But we can know things like theorems and mathematical objects and these kinds of things also through reason. We obtain knowledge of mathematical objects, as he described, by taking certain axioms, things as given, and then analyzing and working from those things given to how things like math works. Okay? True ultimate knowledge doesn't require anything to be taken as given. No hypotheses. You don't need any images in your mind. It's just like a pure intuitive grasping. You just get it. And it's very hard to achieve. On the other hand, the stuff in the visible world, it doesn't make sense, Plato thinks, to talk about knowing this stuff as knowledge. This isn't knowledge. You don't know things. You don't know what images are like. It doesn't rise to the level of knowledge for him. Because these things are always changing. There's nothing stable about them that we can grasp. So we can form opinions or beliefs about these things. We can use our senses to make predictions about physical things, but that's all that we're doing. We don't have knowledge of these things. We're just making predictions about these things. We just have opinions or beliefs about these things. And on the bottom, when it comes to images, reflections, shadows of things, we can also form opinions about them, but they're an even lesser kind of opinion than this stuff. They're opinions formed by the imagination. So, Plato divides up reality into this way. The intelligible realm versus the visible realm. If we actually want to know what's really real and true, we need to use our reason to achieve understanding of the forms that ground everything else, that make everything what it is. And so, what are the takeaways here? Well, opinions, beliefs, knowledge, all have different epistemic value. What should we seek after in our lives? Well, ultimately, we should seek knowledge. Knowledge is the most valuable. Knowledge is what actually gets us to how the world works. Beliefs are better than nothing. They're better than opinions. I mean, what good does an opinion do? Opinions are like assholes, right? Everybody has one. is no true knowledge of our physical world. How we feel, our attitudes about this stuff, doesn't rise to the level of knowledge, Plato thinks. Because these things, again, are changing, they're in flux, they're temporal. There's nothing stable about them that we can grasp and understand. Okay? So, there's no real knowledge of what goes on in our physical reality. Real or true knowledge can only be attained by grasping the forms of things. The essence of a table. The concept of justice. Now, why might Plato offer a theory like this? Here's one reason. This kind of view is very intuitive, because if you want to say that there is something in reality called a desk, and there are certain things that are desks and there are certain things that aren't desks, you have to presume there's something like an essence about what makes a desk a desk. You know, what makes a marker a marker. If you think there are real differences between things in the world, what makes the thing that it is? Well, what better answer than the perfect concept of that thing? Grasping the forms, however, is very difficult, as we'll see next class. But while we end here, closing thoughts. What do you think about this? He's presenting us a picture of reality and how we know it. Crazy? Weird? Does it make sense? Maybe? Yeah.
Definitely a lot to digest overall. I mean, he kind of just throws a bunch of things in front of your face and kind of like expects you to kind of pick it up.
Yeah.
But, I mean, overall, it does make sense how it's kind of like this card is using multiple words to kind of like prove that things are real.
Yeah. I forgot to write the Greek words over here. You don't need to know these, but pistis and ikasia. The words for belief, word for imagination. Anybody else have any closing thoughts? Otherwise, y'all can go. Or questions. Because this is a complicated view. I mean, it's very theoretical and abstract, right? Yeah?
Does he think that he acquires knowledge through the physical world? And if he says the physical world is constantly changing, wouldn't your knowledge also change?
There is no knowledge to be gained from the physical world.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes
You
more
can
sense.
only form beliefs about the physical world or opinions about the, because he thinks that knowledge is only knowledge of intelligible things like concepts.
Okay. That makes more sense to me. 'Cause
But
I was a little confused.
but those concepts are connected to the physical world in some sense, because this unchanging eternal concept of tableness is what makes this table a table.
Right. That makes more sense.
Yeah. There's like a singular concept that makes all instances of in the physical world that thing, to the degree that they line up with that concept.
That's a lot, but that makes more sense.
And this is all going to be related to what we talk about on Tuesday, because, anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.